He's a clinician specializing in clinical pharmacology and also heads up the Clinical Study Core Unit in the Study Center in Bonn. He has participated in more than 10 studies as an investigator and more than 100 studies as the head of the Clinical Trial Unit. He is also a member of the Executive Committee for the Network of Coordinating Centers for Clinical Trials, so this is the KKS network. Today, he will explain the situation in Germany with regards to publicly funded trials and the development and role of the KKS network and in these activities and how this contributes to healthcare.
So thanks a lot for the nice introduction. And first of all, I have to say I have to apologize myself because I have no anniversary and no birthday to announce. Yeah, I'm very sorry, but I can congratulate, of course. Yeah, so yeah, thanks for having me here, and I would like to explain you a bit the German situation of the Coordinating Centers for Clinical Trials and the network of it. And to give you insight in that, the talk is structured first in why a coordinating center is important in our eyes, then about the sponsor responsibilities in academic institutions. Then I will give you the example of where I come from, the Study Center Bonn, and give you a few ideas to the network of the coordinating centers then, and then last slide on the public funded trials in Germany, or the opportunities we have. So first of all, what is needed to have a scientific and legally sound clinical trial? If you look at the scientific community and the national law, of course, you need the clinical expertise, you need the scientific expertise, and often, if not phase 1 trials, access to the patients. And on the other hand, you need the regulatory legal expertise, trial methodology, tools for clinical research like the database, a solid database, and project management skills, which lies more, the one thing lies more with the investigator, so the doctor in a hospital doing the trial with the patient, and the other parts that lie more with the sponsor of a trial. If you have a commercial trial, then these tasks are covered by the industry. But if this is an investigator-initiated trial, so it's coming from the academia itself, then of course in principle the investigator could do it, but has often not the time, or has mostly not the time, and most likely not the expertise, and that's why trial coordinating centers were set up in Germany. So what you need for task and work packages in such a coordinating center, it was named today in different talks, so you need a project management, monitoring of the data, safety management, so the pharmacovigilance in the trial, the quality management, that everything follows SOPs and the laws. Of course, you need the biometry to plan a trial, and for proper analysis, the data management, so that you have the data in the end that are really the data that you obtain from the patient. You need an IT system to guarantee all these, and of course, something like IMP handling and site management support is useful. So what you need is an interdisciplinary team to set up scientists, physicians, pharmacists, statisticians, and so on, to have all these knowledges together. And this is pretty different from a lab project where you basically have a more limited knowledges you need to get together. Yeah. Normally I don't say it in front of lab researchers, of course, so here I can say it maybe. So if you start with it, so to take the essential functions in the beginning, is you don't need everything at the same time at the beginning, and in our eyes, or in my eyes, it's of course you need a head of it, and the project management, caring about the whole thing, how a trial starts and ends and everything in between. You need of course the statistician and the quality management, and parts like data management, monitoring, safety management, even training and education is more easier to get from outside or to implement later in your unit if you start with it. And something like site management, so to support the study nurse and the doctor with the patient to obtain the data, can also be implemented later, or is more often in place than the other things. Yeah, so that was at least the situation in Bonn. So how can something like this be financed, or how is this financed in the German situation? So first of all, the institution and the medical faculty has to pay for it to a certain degree, because you have to compensate for services that cannot be financed from outside. So if you do a monitoring trial, you can get the money maybe from the money giver, if it's publicly funded or by industry funded back. But if you train the people, or if you consult the people how to write an application for a grant, this will probably not get back to you. So the medical faculty has to pay for a certain amount just to have it up and running. And then there's the public funding if you apply for different trials or projects. Or in Germany there was a general funding period, I will explain later, to start everything up. And of course you can have investigator-initiated trials, so the sponsors within the university, but it's funded by the industry. And in some places in Germany, the training education, like investigator courses or GCP refresher or whatever you take as educating courses, then some money comes from this back as well. So initially, the BMBF, so the Ministry for Education and Research in Germany, in about 2000, started to put money in the system to enforce the universities to build up such coordinating centers, and Bonn was not on the list at that time, so a pity, of course. And there were two different funding rounds, and then the KKS, and then the network of it was financed as well. And the ICRIN initiative you saw a few minutes before was also funded by the BMBF. So that was meant to get the thing started in different places, but it's so the funding is over now. So there's no general funding for these institutions or for these coordinating centers anymore. So if you want to write our ministry a letter, say, well, put some more money in it, you can do it, of course. But no, I'm just kidding. So it's over the general startup period. So one short sentence to the sponsor responsibilities in academic institution, because this has really come up in Germany over the last month or years, that normally the sponsor in the university is maybe in the medical faculty, the dean, or for example, sometimes it's the university, sometimes it's the university hospital, and if you want that he takes the sponsorship, then you went to him, and it was a thing of about between 30 seconds, and then he was the sponsor. And this has changed, so at some places something went wrong, and then the people realized, oh, the sponsor is responsible for everything coming from the law, but he didn't know about the trial. Yeah, and of course he has not cared about the different tasks because it's just a single person. I mean, the dean of a medical faculty has millions of important things to do, and not only to care about a single trial. And so it changed, and now the sponsor, because the sponsor can pass tasks to different people, but not the basic responsibility, it changed in so far that now the sponsor has to implement a quality control system. And if the quality control says, yes, this is a good trial, you can take over the sponsor responsibility, then it is the 10-second signature, and then it goes on. And it's a bit different how it's organized in Germany. In Bonn, this quality control is with the Clinical Trial Coordinating Center, but it directly reports to the dean in this particular function. A few slides to the study center in Bonn. We started later, so we waited until the money was over from the ministry, and then then Bonn started. And we built the study center Bonn, and the idea from the beginning on was that it is a comprehensive organization for all people somehow involved in clinical trials. So it starts with the clinical study centers in the different departments, cardiology, gastroenterology, whatever you can name there. And then the coordinating center for clinical trials, we call it clinical study core unit. It was maybe it's not the best term, but that's how we called it. And this was attached and newly built then to the Clinical Pharmacology Institute, where I come from actually, and the Institute of Biometrics, Informatics and Epidemiology, because it was there before, and there lie, of course, a lot of expertises for this field, but also the pool of study nurses exists, and the administrative departments is part of the clinical trial thing at the university. So everything together is the Study Center Bonn. So this trial coordinating center for is embedded in a whole infrastructure for clinical research, and so what are the tasks of this a coordinating center for clinical trials within this whole thing then. Of course, we especially support these investigator-initiated trials with all these sponsor duties I mentioned before, so that they can perform and then that you get good data from it and that the patients are protected, of course. We support the clinical trial sites with the site management, even if they do company-sponsored trials, so to have a proper treatment of the trial patients within the different departments. It depends really on the clinic how much support makes sense. A special thing in Bonn is that we have a phase 1 unit because we're clinical pharmacologists, so this is not the normal case, but we like it and we put it together to have a translational aspect there as well. And we support the researchers in the laboratory to teach them how they get to the phase 1 unit, because it's a long way from the bench to there. We all know that. And we do the training and education of the people in Bonn, and this is for free in Bonn for the investigators, so that nobody can say, well, sorry, I don't have the money, I can't come. So that's the task of a coordinating center for clinical trials in Bonn. It's a bit different in every place. So if you go to different places in Bonn, in Germany, it's a bit different. But basically, it's of course the same. And here again is a scheme, so you can see the clinical study centers and all the units. So there are millions more in Bonn, of course. So if I forget to name one, please don't call Bonn, because then they are upset that I forgot their name. So, but I want to make the point: there are the clinical study centers, and then you have this coordinating unit trying to get everything together, and then of course contact to outside. So I think we can go faster over this because this is more a different screen. But it's, all right. So what about the network of coordinating center for clinical trials? It's a long word actually. Yeah? So the KKS network is the term, so it's shorter. So the history is that in 1999 there were these 7 places, and Professor Ohmann is somewhere here in the audience. He's from Düsseldorf, and he was there at the beginning. So as you can see, Bonn was not there. But then in 2016 we have 20 sites now. Now Bonn appeared on the list. And the idea of the network is now why to put everything in a certain thing together. So the one thing is everybody does the trials for his own. So it's no dependency if you work on a trial. But it's about harmonizing the standards and work process and then help each other with it. Then to have the synergistic effects on these trial units, that you have training programs that are comparable and that you can refer to in discussion with the ethics committees, and that you have an increasing visibility in Germany that something like this exists and hopefully makes sense. That you strengthen, of course, the academic profile of clinical trials, and to have more services you can offer to the trial conducting people. So this is the structure of the network. Basically, we have a sort of central office, and there's an executive board in the central office. 3 people are employed and work just for the network, and the executive board is put together by the people working in the different coordinating centers all over Germany, and the expert panels means that these are working groups discussing certain tasks that are of importance in clinical trials, and hopefully to help each other. And of course, there's a connection to ECRIN as well. So what are the activities? We have the coordinating central office in Berlin of this network. There are regular meetings of the General Assembly, twice a year at least. We organize workshops and symposia for the people, and try to support with central solutions like software, for example, obtaining legal advice, communication, and public relationism is important, just to have more visibility, and of course to talk with politics as well. For example, now the new clinical trial directive, the network was involved to discuss it while it was implemented. So these are the topics of the expert panels. So you can see it's more or less the list of the basic things a trial coordinating center has to do: quality management, data management, statistics, as I said before. And as results, we have then harmonized SOPs, or at least partially harmonized. I mean, it's always a bit different between the different places. and of course sharing best practice and have some benefit for everybody out of these panels. And here's some examples. We have a newsletter, the circular, that is that people can read to have a way to talk to people, or that they can read about our network. So the membership, it's a slow and controlled growth. Yeah. So it's not meant to spread the idea all over Germany, but in very rapidly. But we need a critical mass of sites that participate, and they have to agree to these standardized procedures we have in principle at least, and they have to share, of course, our objectives. There's a two-phase admission, so there's 1 year as associated member, and you have to pay the full price. So to say, that's 15,000 per year. So that's maybe something that could be changed. But after 1 year, there is an audit by an external auditor, and then you can get the full membership. And in this audit, your structure, the work, and the processes are looked at, whether they are appropriate or not. So these are the employees. So it's not the number of coordinating centers; it's the employees that work in the coordinating centers. And you see, it's a slow growth. Yeah. But it is a growth, so it's not very recent. So there were new members in the last years, 2014 Bonn, for example. Yeah. And this is just to give you an idea, the number of courses for investigators, study nurses, coordinating investigators, monitoring, GCP refresher, and medical device that were held, and how many participants were there, so to show that we really can train the people in the hospitals. So there's the connection with ECRIN. So ECRIN, so the European correspondent, is part of the central office of the KKS network, and it's trying to structure the work between the KKS network and ECRIN, so that we have more international trials, or more support for international trials. And if someone wants to do an international trial via this KKS network, he can try to reach out to Europe, and the other way around. If someone wants to do a trial in Germany, then via this network he can find places in Germany, for example, for central services like monitoring or something, but also if he is looking for investigators. So how are the trials financed? These are numbers from 2011, which is not very recent data, but there's no big change to it. So if you look at the investigator-initiated trials sponsored by the academic institution, you still have half of it, roughly, that is at least run by money of the industry, and then you have different public funding options, and I will expand on in a second. But at least half of the trials benefit from money from the industry. So more information to the funding options in Germany. So first of all, there are, of course, very small local funds of the medical faculties. For example, in Bonn, we have a program just to make pilot data that enables you to write a bigger grant, because you all need to be convinced to give the money then to a project. And if there are no data, you always respond, or we are not convinced that could work. So of course we try to have pilot data to make it more likely to get a bigger fund. For example, in Bonn, but this exists in different places as well. Then you have the German Research Foundation that has regular funding programs and calls for phase 3 clinical trials. It has a reduced focus on early clinical trials, which is sometimes a pity. So a phase 1, phase 2 trial you can apply for there, but it's not very likely that you get money. Then we have the German Ministry for Education and Research. Again, there is regular calls for phase 3 trials as well, and then depending on topics that they release, and you can get money via the German Centers for Health Research. So there are some centers. For example, for infectious diseases, there's a health research center, So this is not open for every hospital, but for hospitals that are in these centers. Then, of course, societies, associations, for example, the German Cancer Aid, and the Federal Joint Committee, which is put together from health insurances, hospitals, and ministries. There's the Innovation Committee and an Innovation Fund that was just recently released. So this year was the first call, and it supports of healthcare research. But I don't know how this really works, because this is just started up. And there's basically the possibility to have clinical trials funded with off-label use, but it's not very often used. So I think at this point we lack some systems like we heard starting up in Belgium, Britain, and Netherlands to have sort of structured research funding of topics that are of high relevance than for Germany. So I would love if we can get more in contact and talk about these things then for Germany as well. And as I said, there are lots of trials funded by a pharma industry, but then via individual contracts, so there's no general fund that comes from industry then to clinical trials, but it's always an individual discussion with the pharma industry, which is always a lot of fun. So thank you very much. I hope I stayed in the time, and I'm happy to take your questions. I'm happy to be here in this interesting discussion. Thank you.
It strikes me that now that so many European countries are gearing up to do more pragmatic trials, actually there's a danger that several countries will be commissioning similar trials, because they're not on the registry at the time that they're going through the process of being worked up and funded. It's only once they're funded and getting into approval that they go onto the registry. So do you think it's possible for us in some way to share, as funders, to share information on what's coming through the pipeline and what's being commissioned? Sorry, that's a very simple question for you.
Yes. Well, it's. I think it's equally difficult as if you ask a question I have to answer for my wife. Yeah, to be honest. Yeah. No, but of course I can't have the correct answer for the funding agencies. But I think if you look at all these acronym efforts, for example, to have at the point when you have money, the possibility to spread a trial all over Europe. So what is lacking is really to have the opportunity to get money for different countries before, so that you are able to go for an international trial, either pragmatic or let's say a normal phase 3 trial or whatever. So I think it's highly desirable. Yeah, so there should be ways to go for it, even if it's a long way or even if it's not extremely successful in the beginning. So I would argue that it's definitely needed. Yeah, so it's a bit more a statement for me as well. Yeah.
If I may add to that, when we look to the technology assessments in Europe, there is a UNETA database of planned and ongoing research. So different agencies put in the database their planned research. So a similar database could be constructed for planned randomized comparative effectiveness trials, for example, so that the ideas are put there and then interested parties can use this platform and find one another to work on.
Maybe it's a good idea to start with such a thought to say, well, we don't want to double trials, so we have this database, and if then people recognize, oh, we want to do the same trial, then it's maybe closer to say, let's do it together. Yeah? Maybe this is a way to start.
Thomas, could I ask you a side question, please? I saw that you mentioned Adamon as a project. If I remember well, it was intended to compare intensive classic monitoring versus light risk adapted monitoring, because it is relevant to these pragmatic trials. What was the outcome of? Do you have any things to say here to the audience about that?
I wished I knew myself. Yeah? But the point is, the Adamant trial is finished, and at the moment they are looking at the data and analyzing the data. Yeah? So the result of it will be released within the next weeks or month. I can judge because we took part with different trials that were monitored then in two different ways, but we are not in charge to look at the data and to analyze the data. So in a few months or weeks there will be results from it.